Now, Chad, would you state your name and address when you approach the bench? And you will have 5 minutes.
Can I briefly put that on the screen? She already tested it to make sure.
Oh, sure. QR code?
It is.
Yeah.
I suppose I can do this. I'll do that. There we go. My name is Chad Bishop. I live at 7405 South Valencia Drive here in Sioux Falls. Let me begin by saying I reserve the right to be wrong in public because I often am. You have heard me advocate for the expansion of the district's support for First Lego League robotics and the STEM-oriented programs that surround it. One lesson that we might take away from the experience of the pandemic is that improving the public's ability to think critically, use mathematics, and understand the scientific method should continue to be a principal focus for all educators. But today, I am here to advocate for a new kind of curriculum, a new kind of critical thinking, one centered around many of the ideas in this book, first published in 1928 by a man named Edward Bernays. Its title is called Propaganda. It is time that we educate our children on the methods used to influence and manipulate them by public figures, non-governmental organizations, and large corporations, so that they might recognize propaganda and think deeply about the concepts. I can see this dovetail nicely into a curriculum on social media or electronic device self-management and addiction. In his book, Propaganda, Mr. Bernays, talking about public policy, says, to avoid such confusion, society consents to have its choices narrowed to ideas and objects brought to its attention through propaganda of all kinds. There is consequently a vast and continuous effort going on to capture our minds in the interest of some policy or commodity or idea. He is describing the propaganda technique of utilizing the false dilemma fallacy, also referred to as a false dichotomy, as an informal fallacy based on the premise that erroneously limits what options are available. He justifies it as necessary for the sake of political expediency. Conveying the broader concept, he says, the conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in a democratic society. Those who manipulate the unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is true ruling power of our country. Our friends on the left might recognize Noam Chomsky's take on the concept from the common good. The smart way to keep people passive and obedient is strictly limit the spectrum of acceptable opinion, but allow very lively debate within that spectrum, even encourage the more critical and dissident views that give people a sense that there's free thinking going on, while all the time the presuppositions of the system are being reinforced by the limits put on range of the debate. Those in my generation will remember the presentation of another false dilemma. You are either with us or against us. So would you believe I have a relevant example? Please note, this is not a complaint. I am not violating your policy. Last year, my daughter was read the book Anti-Racist Baby by Dr. Ibram X. Kendi in school. On this page, it says babies are taught to be racist or anti-racist. There is no neutrality. Now, how could anyone possibly argue against that statement? Being anti-racist sounds like an unassailable concept. Mr. Bernays made his fortune in advertising. He would likely say, this is a brilliant branding effort. He would also probably acknowledge the skill that is used by folks in the media telling us, Antifa means anti-fascist. You aren't fascist, are you? Why me? No. While we watch the ironically named Antifa run around in black, smashing Starbucks windows, harassing the elderly, and assaulting prayer groups in the fascist capitals of the USA, Seattle and Portland, returning to Kendi, babies are taught to be racist or anti-racist. There is no neutrality. Sounds like you are either with us or against us. Are we sure there are no other options? Is it possible for me to just not be racist without believing the rest of what Mr. Kendi says, writes, and believes? I think so. It is obvious to me. Is it possible for an elementary age child who may or may not have the context, it's in the curriculum, right, to know if there are other options? Are they mature enough to understand? On the back cover of this book, it says, to all the young people whose own imaginations are unbound by the imagination of state violence and white supremacy, and who hold the power to build the world that is anti-racist, I believe in us. It's a compelling statement, the core sentiment I believe in. I think I agree strongly. However, I do have a question. What context was provided to my daughter as they reviewed this book when it came to the discussion around state violence and white supremacy? How does your current curriculum handle this topic? Can you please follow up with me and provide this reference? So I would suggest that this second book, Anti-Racist Baby, is an example of the first book, Propaganda, and that it uses a technique of presenting a false dilemma, a logical fallacy to my elementary school-age child in order to plant seeds and indoctrinate her in a fight against white supremacy. I'm not asking you to ban this book. I'm asking you to help teach our children to recognize this book for what it really is, propaganda. In the spirit of providing solutions, I again call for a curriculum to be created around the understanding of propaganda so that we can further enable our children to think critically and for themselves. Also, I'd like to donate 2 copies to each of the high schools in our district of Thomas Sowell's Discrimination and Disparities. Once again, I share your goal of making the Sioux Falls School District the best in the country. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chad. And I'm going to have you either email or talk to Dr. Boyson. She oversees that department after.
Thank you.
And then to help
Welcome
with
that
all
opportunity.
to get through that. Thank you. Okay, how many did